Joining us now is Dan Arbell, former deputy chief at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. You know, we saw Secretary of State there, Marco Rubio, saying a solid proposal is on the table. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry is saying, quote, to say that we have reached a conclusion on a large portion of the issues under discussion would be correct. However, to say that this means an agreement is on the verge of being signed is not something anyone can claim. The second part of that sentence or that statement seems to negate the first part. How promising does this sound in terms of getting to peace with Iran?
Well, obviously, the details are being worked out, but I think that we are very close. And these are last-minute differences that need to be bridged over, because it seems that the nuclear issue is the main stumbling block. I think the Hormuz Strait issue is pretty much settled, and all that needs to be done is look for ways to advance the issue of Iran's nuclear stockpile, the enriched uranium stockpile, and also an Iranian declaration that it, commits to not becoming a nuclear country. So while the differences have narrowed, we're still in the kind of last rounds of talks. And, this could be resolved perhaps within hours, but this can also, there's no sense of how much time it will take, because we might see this dragging on for days.
They were just talking to Nazim Moinian, and she was saying the same thing. It's really hard to put a timeline on this actual peace deal. I think it's fair to say we have a bit of a framework, and according to the Associated Press, that framework of the deal, Iran is going to give up a stockpile of highly enriched uranium, reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. would then end the blockade in Iran's ports and lift some of the sanctions. But the deal reportedly does not include an end of Iran's support for proxy groups like Hezbollah or an end to Iran's ballistic missile program. This would kind of fall short of the goal set by Israel at the start of this war. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. On day one, when Prime Minister Netanyahu stated Israel's goals, he mentioned regime change in Iran, ending Iran's nuclear program and its ballistic missile program. Here we are 2 months later, and none of those were actually achieved. And this puts Prime Minister Netanyahu in a great bind back home, as he's not been delivering on his promises. And so certainly, and what you mentioned, the proxies issue, the issue of Israel, Hezbollah, and Lebanon, all those are unresolved portfolios. And if they're not going to be advanced in some way, towards a resolution, then, Israel basically, since day one, has not accomplished that much in terms of what it intended to accomplish on day one.
Speaking of the prime minister, there are some new reports coming out from Reuters that seem to suggest that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told some of his confidants that Israel, quote, has little ability, end quote, to influence President Trump's decisions. The two have seemed, very close at times, and it seems like there's a divergence happening right now. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. Netanyahu prided himself, and still does, on his close, intimate ties with Trump, and to be quoted saying such a thing is really, we've not heard such a thing before. I think that Netanyahu is learning the limits of his power and the limits of the strength of his partnership with Trump, or that basically that Trump, first and foremost, acts on U.S. interests and puts Israel's interests high up there, but not as important as U.S. interests. And certainly, Netanyahu has put all his eggs in one basket in terms of gambling on Trump and his relationship with Trump. And he has no way to work around Trump in order to, advance Israeli interests. And he finds, all of a sudden, that he's facing this very problematic situation, that he cannot deliver on his promises, he cannot advance his goals.
While that relationship seems to have some divide, we are seeing the president get closer with other leaders in the Middle East. President Trump over this weekend spoke with leaders from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Jordan, and Bahrain. He's asking those countries that haven't signed the Abraham Accord to go ahead and sign that, which would normalize relationships and relations with Israel. He wrote in a pretty lengthy Truth Social post about, the countries that have signed, saying this: the Abraham Accord have been great for them and will be ever better for everybody and bring true power, strength, and peace to the Middle East for the first time in 5,000 years. It should start with the immediate signing by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and everybody else should follow suit. How realistic does that sound? Because that would be substantial progress.
Absolutely. I think that the reason Trump is saying that is to placate or to make Israel feel better as he's about to sign a deal that won't make Israel very happy. But in terms of practically advancing, having Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others join the Abraham Accords, I don't see it happening anytime soon. There has to be advancement of the Palestinian issue or some step by Israel to be willing to discuss Palestinian statehood down the road, and this current government is not willing to do so. So I honestly believe that while Trump wants to show Israel he's trying to do things that in its interests, then realistically speaking, I don't think it's possible at this point in time.
Yeah. I guess to hit this home a little bit more, does calling for majority Muslim, these countries to normalize relationships with Israel slow down the chance of getting a deal done? Or could this be a path to what many of us want, lasting peace in the Middle East?
I think he needs that coalition of Muslim majority countries is important for Trump to to support the deal that he's making with Iran. Yeah. And so he's trying to bring them on board on one hand, to listen to them on the other hand, and at the same time, make Israel feel better. But it's a kind of juggling act here that it's not possible to keep everyone happy at the same time, and it's going to be very difficult to bring this about in practical terms in the near future.
Yeah, it certainly feels like there's a lot of pieces on the chessboard and a ways to go to get to checkmate and end this conflict. But again, we're going to continue to follow. Really appreciate your time and your perspective, Dan Arbell. Thank you.